Throughout the service, we will hear readings from the last week of Jesus' life. This is our first reading.
You can't get out that easy.
I told you 46 minutes. 21. The scripture reading, the triumphal entry, Matthew 21, verses 1 through 11. When they had come near Jerusalem and it had reached Bethphage at the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village ahead of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, just say this, 'The Lord needs them,' and he will send them immediately." This took place to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet, saying, "Tell the daughter of Zion, look, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey and on a colt, the foal of a donkey." The disciples went and did as Jesus had directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and put their cloaks on them, and he sat on them. A very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, and others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. The crowds that went ahead of him and that followed were shouting, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord! Hosanna in the highest heaven!" When he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was in turmoil, asking, "Who is this?" The crowds were saying, "This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee." We will now hear from our children's choir.
Messy, chaotic, happy, joyful, thank you so much, kind of thing. Where people were so excited about Jesus showing up in Jerusalem, they were pulling the branches off the trees to put them on the ground in front of him. Finally, after some Lenten wanderings into the fellowship hall, we have found ourselves here back again in our sanctuary, and on this day, Palm Sunday. It's the day that we wave the palms around, we shout Hosanna, the day that we remember Jesus' arrival in Jerusalem to celebrate the Jewish holiday of Passover, itself the remembrance of a liberation struggle of God's people liberated from slavery in Egypt. This is the first day of a week that is so special, we've come to call it Holy Week. Now for many of us, Palm Sunday is just the precursor to Easter, and we go from joy to joy, celebrating Jesus, the one who comes in the name of the Lord, to celebrating Jesus who is risen indeed. But there's more in Holy Week than that. Every year, did you know, during Holy Week, we have extra church services? I know, it's great. There's a Bible study and soup supper on Holy Thursday, where we remember the Last Supper, the conversations and symbolic actions Jesus did when he was at dinner with his friends. And then on Friday, which we also call Good Friday, we have 2 services. At noon, there's an ecumenical one. Ecumenical is a fancy word that means all the Christian denominations together. We'll do a service with all the churches in town at the Church of the Good Shepherd at noon. Prayers and readings and songs together, and then we'll have another service here at 7, a little bit quieter, stories and readings and prayers and some candles and quiet songs. You are all most welcome to come to all of these. But each year, most of our members don't show up on Thursday or Friday. And that's fine. We have a lot of things in our lives keeping us from being here. And so for those of us who can't make it on weeknights, instead of being left out of the depth of feeling and the complexity of emotion that this week holds, we wanted to kind of provide some of that story here. It is not, most certainly not, a week that moves from joy to joy, just as our lives don't really move that way either, right? This week has space for pain, for anger, for suffering, for desperation, for fear. Things that maybe we feel we know a little bit better than joy. And maybe that's why we don't feel as compelled to come to those extra services on Thursday and Friday. We need more practice with joy, with hope and belief. But I think we need the places to rest our griefs and our fears just as much. This week is the center of our faith. Its realities are the daily stuff of our lives. And so today we're not going to stop with the joy, with the playful imagery of a king who arrives on a donkey greeted by children to claim his throne. We're going to continue to walk with Jesus through this last week of his life in story and song and liturgy. So in order to help us focus our hearts and our minds on the week ahead, the work ahead, I wanted to take some time now to do our announcements, so that we have the rest of the service free and clear to kind of go forward with our walk of faith.
The woman anoints Jesus in Bethany. Matthew 26, verse 1 to 16. When Jesus had finished saying all these things, he said to his disciples, "You know that after 2 days the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified." Then the chief priests and the elders of the people gathered in the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and they conspired to arrest Jesus by steal and kill him. But they said, "Not during the festival, or there may be a rot among the people." Now Jesus was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper. A woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very costly ointment, and she poured it on his head as he sat at the table. But when the disciples saw it, they were angry and said, "Why this waste? For this ointment could have been sold for a large sum, and the money given to the poor." But Jesus, aware of this, said to them, "Why do you trouble the woman? She has performed a good service for me. For you always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. By pouring this ointment on my body, she has prepared me for burial. Truly I tell you, whoever has good news is proclaimed in the whole world. What she has done will be told in remembrance of her." Then one of the 12, who was called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me if I betray him to you?" They paid him 30 pieces of silver, and from that moment he began to look for an opportunity to betray him. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
On the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying, Where do you want us to make the preparations for you to eat the Passover? And he said, Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, The teacher says, My time is near. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples. So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover meal. When it was evening, he took his place with the 12. And while they were eating, he said, Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me. And they became greatly distressed and began to say to him one after another, Surely not I, Lord. And he answered, The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him. But woe to that one by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that one not to have been born. Judas, who betrayed him, said, Surely not I, Rabbi. And he said, You have said so. While they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, Take, eat, this is my body. Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, saying, Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will never again drink of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. When they had sung the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives.
So if you had a week left to live, I don't know about you, I would try to eat every single thing that I could. And Jesus maybe was feeling that way because he ends up at tables a lot this week. So the first table that Jesus encounters after he comes in with the palms and the Hosanna and the donkey, the first table he encounters is a table in the temple. It's where he goes right after the Palm Sunday parade, and this table is a table for the money changers. It's a symbol of corruption and inequality that has become part and parcel of the worship of God. As we were talking about the mostly poor folks who lived in the country, remember that? Over our Lenten study, the poor folks from the country came to the big city to celebrate, and the merchants took the opportunity to maybe gouge them a little on the appropriate sacrifices or on the costs of money changing into their local currency. They're changing their local currency into the official Roman coinage. Jesus, mild and riding a donkey just moments before, now throws that whole table over like Real Housewives style in an expression of the rage at what sin has done in our human community. Jesus goes on to keep talking about this in other ways as he's sitting with his disciples over the course of the week. So the first reading Lisa read is in Matthew 21, and the ones that Annabelle and Luann read are in Matthew 26. In those 5 chapters, there is a lot of talking. Jesus tells the parable of the sheep and the goats. Remember that one? Whatever you did for the least of these, you did it to me, or you did not do it for me. He talks about the importance of staying awake, because Jesus woke before wokeness was a thing. The importance of paying attention to what was going on. He was trying all the time to get his message to really sink into his followers. At Bethany, then, Jesus is shown care and love as he's recognized by the woman that we remember with the alabaster jar. But the next story, the story of the Last Supper, is a little bit different, right? Jesus still might need that love and care for his tender spirit, but now he has to get these disciples in line. He speaks to them frankly of the betrayal that he knows is coming. Judas looks him in the face, and Jesus does not turn away. What kind of love is that? That turns to the very ones who will hurt us and betray us and offers its own body for their benefit. I'm mesmerized by this scene, by Jesus' grace and mercy, but at the same time, he is no pushover. He tells them what he knows they will do to him. He speaks truthfully and clearly about the betrayal and denial that awaits him. I wonder if we can learn this kind of love that doesn't shrink from naming the things that are wrong, but that also offers love without end. This is the real, true love that God offers to all of us every day. The same mercy and grace that Jesus offered the ones who would betray and deny him, he offers to us every single day. And so in response to that gift, we're going to have a moment to give our offerings to God today with some songs and dancing maybe, to show Jesus what his gift means to us, how much we appreciate it. We will collect offerings for the birthday offering. Pat, will you hold the plate? And then we will pass them. So, and hopefully someone has a song in their heart. Everyone's going to be silent. Caroline? Annabelle? Richard?
Jesus prays in the garden, Matthew 26, verses 36 through 46. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee and began to be grieved and agitated. Then he said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and stay awake with me." And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not what I want, but what you want." Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, "So could you not stay awake with me 1 hour? Stay awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again he went away for the 2nd time and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done." Again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the 3rd time, saying the same words. Then he came to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand."
If you see it, there are now the invitation. Jesus asked us to take care of the poor and oppressed, but we are too concerned with our own power and wealth. Jesus asked us to share in his ministry, but we can always find an excuse not to help. Jesus asked us to keep awake, but we find our sleepy eyes too heavy to hold open. Let us pray.
Jesus, as we walk with you through this last week in your life, we are overwhelmed by your love for us and for all you do. We confess that we have not always believed we deserve your love. We confess that we have not always freely given your love. We confess that we have fallen asleep just when you asked us to stay awake. Forgive us, we pray, and form us in the image of your love.
This is the good news. God loves us. It's for all of us. God's forgiveness is given freely.
Make us new in your love, Lord Jesus. Amen.
Matthew chapter 26, verse 47 to 56. While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived with him was a loud crowd with swords and clubs. from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him." At once he came up to Jesus and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you are here to do." Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. Suddenly, one of those with Jesus put his hand on his sword, drew it, and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled, which say it must happen in this way?" At that hour Jesus said to the crowds, "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a bandit? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not arrest me. But all this has taken place so that the scriptures of the prophets may be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. Let us sing hymn 286. Stay with me. Our next scripture reading is from Matthew 26, verses 57 to 66. Matthew 26, verses 57 to 66. The trial. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, in whose house the scribes and the elders had gathered. But Peter was following him at a distance, as far as the courtyard of the high priest, and going inside, he sat with the guards in order to see how this would end. Now the chief priest and the whole council were looking for false testimony against Jesus, so that they might put him to death, but they found none. Though many false witnesses come forward, at last 2 came forward and said, "This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and build it in 3 days." The high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer? What is it that you testify against you?" But Jesus was silent. Then the priest said to him, "I put you under oath before the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "You have said so. But I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated on the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his cloth and said, "He has blasphemed. Why do we still need witnesses? You have now heard this blasphemy. What is your verdict?" They answered, "He deserves death."
Matthew 27, 1 through 5. When morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people conferred together against Jesus in order to bring about his death. They bound him, led him away, and handed him over to the Pilate, the government. When Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was commanded, he repented and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priest. And the elder, he said, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. But they said, what is that to us? See to it yourself. Throwing down the pieces of silver in the temple, he departed and he went and hanged himself.
Pilate and the crowd, Matthew 27:15-23. Now at the festival, the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd, anyone whom they wanted. At that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Jesus Barabbas. So after they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release to you, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Messiah?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with this innocent man, for today I have suffered a great deal because of a dream about him." Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus killed. The governor again said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what should I do with Jesus who is called the Messiah?" All of them said, "Let him be crucified." Then he asked, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified."
From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. At about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani?" That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "This man is calling for Elijah." At once, one of them ran and got a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink. But the other said, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him." Then Jesus cried again with a loud voice and breathed his last. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks were split. The tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. After his resurrection, they came out of the tombs and entered the holy city and appeared to many. Now when the centurion and those with him who were keeping watch over Jesus saw the earthquake and what took place, they were terrified and said, "Truly, this man was God's son." Many women were also there, looking on from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee and had provided for him. Among them were Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. Please stand and let us sing together hymn 283, Were There.
A reading from Matthew chapter 27, verses 57 through 61. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who was also a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. So Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the door of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the tomb. Friends, will you pray with me, saying, "God of love, stay with us." Holy One, we stand with the women at the feet of the cross. We are stunned, we are afraid, we are disappointed, we are unsure, we are quiet. God of love,
Stay with us.
We remember Jewish people who have faced renewed anti-Semitism this year. We remember all who face bigotry and discrimination daily. Oh God, make it difficult for us to hate. Fill us with the love of your own child who came to this world not to condemn but to save. God of love, stay with us. remember the people we know and don't know who live in abusive relationships with family and friends and work and other things, people who were taught that they should suffer for love. Make us strong to stand against abuse. Give us the kind of love that offers help, support, and encouragement instead. The kind of love that brings us to life and sets us free. God of love, stay with us. Jesus, we remember those in the forgotten corners of our world, those honored in your story today. People who are betrayed by the ones they love, people who are tortured or abused, government officials and judicial systems who know that things are not working right but do nothing to stop it. Mothers who watch their children die, and any and all who feel that hope is dead. God of love, stay with us. And we remember those parts of ourselves, the suffering, the fear, the despair, the grief, the anger that we won't show to anyone else, that we hide even from ourselves. Sit with us, God, in those fearsome places. Breathe love and life into our deepest corners. Cover us with forgiveness, compassion, mercy, and hope. God of love, stay with us. Eternal God, you have promised to never leave us. You have lived our pain. You know our struggles. Stand with us as we look to Sunday, to the promise of relief from all pain, the promise of hope over all despair, the promise of a love that is stronger than death. Fill us with the power of this love as we go from this place today and always. God of love, stay with us. Jesus, we lift our voices to you in the words that you yourself taught us to pray, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Holy Week, just like Jesus' story, is only just beginning. So friends, if you feel in yourself a desire to be known, to be heard and understood, to meet with a family of friends around a supper table, to question and wonder and learn, please come join us on Thursday night. If you have dug something up during this service, some pain or grief or fear that you don't feel quite ready to leave behind, please join us on Friday at noon or at 7 for space to grieve, to feel pain, to know your betrayal. Because denying these feelings only makes them stronger, and pushing them down only forces them out in other ways. Bringing them into the light decreases their power. Good Friday is a place to put all of these things to rest, to find peace, and to be fully loved. There's something about the liturgical year. If you're like me and you can have a hard time feeling your feelings appropriately at the appropriate times, for whatever reason, it can help to have a community around you who says, now is the time. If there is a sadness or a pain or a grief that you carry, now is the time. Now is the place. It's okay. The disciples, those women, in those 2 days, and they didn't know what was going to happen. That's what I feel like most of the time. But I'm afraid to feel it. So this week, we can. Because we know what is coming in a week from now. A week from this moment, we will be here with flowers and lilies and friends and songs. And we will know, as we know now, that love is stronger than death. That nothing can separate us from Christ. So friends, one last thing as we leave today. There's a paper in your bulletin. If you would like, if you need one, I'll bring them to you. Some people don't have one, that's fine. If you would like to write down the pain or the fear or the anxiety, the question that's running circles in your head that you can't put away, if you'd like, write it on this table and bring it here to the foot of the cross, which is strong enough, I promise, to carry all of it. And we can leave these burdens behind and go in peace to fellowship. So as you're ready, bring your paper up, leave it behind, and feel free to go downstairs. Friends, we go in peace to love and serve God.